Hello, everybody. Today in our screencast, we're going to be looking at comparison and contrast. We're going to be looking for things that are similar or different. When we compare something, we look for its similarities and we look for its differences. So if we look here, yes, they're both fruit, so that's what's similar, but what's different about them? And that's what we're going to be looking at today is how texts express similarities and differences. So when we talk about comparison or comparing, our focus is on what's similar. In other words, they're both cars, they have the same shape, same kind of tires, and yet their color is different. So the contrast is the color. They're different colors. And many times in a text, things are a little bit more complicated. So we sometimes want to use a Venn diagram to help us see similarities and differences. We ask ourselves, if we're talking about sharks, what's similar? What do they have alike? They're both good swimmers and they have lots of teeth. But if we look and we say, oh, we have different kinds of sharks. We have a great white shark and we have a bull shark. And the great white shark likes deep, cold seas, whereas the bull shark likes shallow water. So when we look, we can see, yes, what is similar, but what is different about each kind of shark. So now let's look at a text. Sometimes a text will focus on similarities, and this is where we have to pay attention to words or phrases that point to we're talking about similarities, things that are similar or alike. So if we look at the organization of information in the text, in the whole paragraph, they're going to be showing us what's similar in sign languages. The communication systems developed by deaf people have a great deal in common with spoken languages. So we're looking at sign languages and we're looking at spoken languages. In which ways are they similar? And we see here similar, similarly, the same. Signers communicate at a speed similar to that of native speakers. Similarly, that means talking. Similarly, research also has shown that sign languages and spoken languages cause the same areas of the brain to be active. So we have to look and say, what is being compared? Sign languages and spoken languages, and in what ways are they similar? If we look here, this paragraph is focusing on differences. And what's different, we can see here today's immigrants compared to 19th century immigrants. So, in what way are they different? The backgrounds and experiences of today's immigrants to the U.S. are different from those of 19th century immigrants. So, we immediately see it's today's immigrants compared to 19th century immigrants. And then we look for our markers. What words show us? Unlike, instead of. These show us that things are different. The earlier immigrants, who are almost all from Europe, the majority of contemporary immigrants come from Asia and Latin America. So they're different in their origin. And they're also different in another way. Moved into their own ethnic neighborhoods, and many of today's immigrants favor middle-class suburbs. So again, they're different in where they came from, their countries of origin, and in where they settled in the new country. Sometimes we can see contrasts, not just in the whole paragraph, but within a sentence. So if we look here, again, we're comparing today's immigrants with 19th century immigrants. And if we look here, unlike the earlier immigrants who are all from Europe, the majority of contemporary immigrants come from Asia and Latin America. So what's the difference? Where they're from? Europe versus Asia and Latin America. Instead of moving into their own ethnic neighborhoods in the inner city, as the 19th century Europeans did, many of today's immigrants favor middle-class suburbs. So we're comparing within the same sentence where they settled. And sometimes we have a paragraph which has both in it. So there's both similarities and differences. So we see different from and similarly today. And again, here it's the differences and the similarities. And what's important is that we pay attention to words like different from, contemporary immigrants, and pay attention, let's just go back. We pay attention to what is either being compared or contrasted. There are all kinds of words that can help us see that there are comparisons being made in the text. And it's a good idea to learn these words. So we have nouns and we have verbs, comparison and compare. Equivalence, equal to, resemblance, resemble, they look like. Similarity, they're similar to. All of these words, both, in common, comparable, or in common with, like, similar, as. So when you're reading, look for these comparison and contrast markers and highlight them, circle them, mark them in some way, and ask yourself, what's being compared? And here too, we have a list of contrast markers. And I suggest you perhaps take a picture of this slide and learn the different words that help us see that there is a contrast, change, contrast, difference, distinction, variety, to change, to contrast, to differ, to distinguish, to vary. All of these different words show us that there's some kind of difference. And connectors that we need to pay attention, those that show some kind of difference. But, however, in contrast to, instead of, in theory and in practice, we do one thing, but we actually act in another. On the one hand, on the other hand, rather than, unlike, whereas, while. All of these words are important to, again, recognize and mark in the text while you're reading. And while you're reading, it's also a good idea to take notes and pay attention and organize information in a way that you can go back to it. You can create a matrix, or you can create a Venn diagram, or you can take notes. So now that you're reading, please make sure that you pay attention to, excuse me, the comparisons and the contrasts, the similarities and the differences in a text.